I think we're going to get started. Again, welcome. I'm Beth Hamilton from the Commission on Independent Schools, and we're really excited this morning to talk about developing a collective vision for student success. We have that title. We're really talking about what we call a portrait of a graduate, profile of a learner, and these are used by schools to really think about the essential skills, competencies, and attributes that every graduate should possess. Creating a portrait of a graduate, I'm going to go with that title rather than back and forth with a profile of a learner, involves a collaborative effort among a school community. And by aligning programs with this vision, schools can assess whether their curriculum, their teaching methods, their extracurricular activities, everything effectively nurtures these desired outcomes. And a portrait of a graduate should articulate the full range of outcomes that schools want for their graduates. Schools often evaluate student progress against the portrait of a graduate competencies, and they track how well students might demonstrate critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, adaptability, whatever the skills and qualities that are outlined in this portrait. And this assessment can then really help with instructional revision and professional development, right? So at this point, I'm going to ask to put up a survey, and let's get a sense of how many of your schools actually have already created a portrait of a learner, portrait of a graduate, and let's see where everybody stands. It looks like a nice balance, and those of you, the most that are developing or considering developing a portrait of a graduate, portrait of a learner, then this will be really perfect timing. So we'll keep that up for a minute so a few more can answer, but let's think about how in the best case scenario, your portrait of a graduate will serve as a compass guiding schools toward holistic student development and continuous program enhancement. So this morning, I'm joined by two of our NEASC schools that have really creative and effectively used portrait of a graduate documents to support their students and fine-tune the goals that they have for their students. And I'm thrilled to have Dr. Lisa Diaz, who's the head of school at World Academy in Nashua, New Hampshire. This is a pre-K to 8 school. And Dr. Andrew Ruoss from Greenwich Country Day, a pre-K to 12 school. Andrew is the upper school academic dean and an economics teacher. So there's our poll. We've got the results. Lisa and Andrew, you see where our audience stands? Okay, we're gonna take that down. So often we get a sense of the product of a portrait of a graduate. Sometimes you see those on schools' websites. And what really is helpful this morning, we've asked Andrew and Lisa to take us into their thinking and their process. And I'm always thrilled to look at process rather than just the product. So Lisa's going to start us off, and then we'll hear about Andrew from Greenwich Country Day. So Lisa, let me turn this over to you and let you share your screen. If you have questions, let me just say, we will have question and answer time at the end. And if you put those into the Q&A, we'll have a conversation at the end. All right, Lisa.
All right, thank you, Beth.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm just going to share my screen. Slideshow. Okay, so World Academy, we're a private independent. We're actually infant through 8th grade, which begins at 6 weeks old and through 8th grade. And we're in Nashua, New Hampshire, and we have about 500 students in our program. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of the process that we went through and how we share this with our staff and with our families. So here's just a little a picture of the front of our building. We were established in 1980, and we continue to grow. We started as a preschool, and now we have, like I said, infants through 8th grade, about 500 students. So here's our mission. And so the mission, I think, is always at the heart of the decisions we make. So when you're talking about portrait of a graduate. I think that the mission is, the very beginning of this process and helps guide the next steps of developing your portrait of a graduate or portrait of a learner. So what is it? What is a portrait of a graduate? For us, it went beyond, obviously we have our curriculum, which every school has, your foundational skills, what you're learning in the classroom, what you want your students to learn. But really, for us, when we were wrapping our minds around creating this portrait of a graduate, it was figuring out, collectively, what is our vision? What do we want from students to do when they're with us, so that when they leave us, they can successfully navigate their next steps. And that is different for, every child, every student. So what can we offer? And we say a world of opportunity. And for us, that means just, trying to provide as many opportunities for each child's interests, so that way when they leave our school, they have the skills, the values, and they've had the experiences to tackle their next steps in their educational journey. So for a portrait of a graduate, when we were beginning, and this was one of the more challenging parts, was what are, the 4 to 5, or it could be 3, it could be 6, I guess, but most meaningful, succinct, and authentic representation of our school's graduates. So if you can imagine asking that question, it's not something you can just answer. So I want to take you through the process that we went through to get to this end result, which was all of the collaboration amongst our faculty and staff, and which led us to the end results. But this is the overall theme or goal when we were developing our portrait of a graduate. So the guiding questions that we went through when we were discussing this was, what is unique about the students at our school? So that is something that, you can all think about. Feel free to add that in the chat as well during this, but really think about what is unique about the students in your school. That's what we asked ourselves. And then, what are the characteristics, behaviors that we think are most linked to success later in their life or in their academic journey? What aptitudes and attitudes do our students have that make them unique amongst peers their age? So again, these are big questions, and it takes quite a bit of time to unpack. And then, in the end, it's, when we talk about the graduate, so how our students transform because of the time they've spent at World Academy. So for each of you, the experiences that students have at your school, how does that shape them as an individual? At World Academy, we talk a lot about having a well-rounded person. And so for us, we look at what experiences will they be afforded to help them become well-rounded. And that is different for each student. Okay, so the brainstorming sessions, now this took a while. This wasn't something you can do in 1 PD or 2. It was a fairly lengthy process. Again, when you're working with your schools, what that looks like, some of those bigger questions for infant teachers or a preschool teacher, even a 3rd grade versus an 8th grade, it's very different. So it takes time to digest and step away and then come back and work together. So the first step for us was just, when we asked those questions, we're getting our thoughts and words out. So just allowing individuals at different times, whether it's through professional development or set up collaboration times, to just put it all out there, what their thoughts are, the words that came to mind. And then after that process, we We took some time to find patterns in the words that people were using. Again, you know, the way a teacher of a toddler would describe critical thinking or problem solving is going to look much different than that of, you know, a 13-year-old. So we would find patterns in the words we were using. And then from there, we divided them into different themes and or shared outcomes of you know, what we wanted for our students. So again, that was a whole other process of kind of taking the things people were saying and grouping them together. And then from there, we refined those things and created, you know, our succinct statements. And so the part of that was our staff working together. So once we went through all of that, because you know, we worked in smaller groups, and our administrative team actually led a lot of this together. And then we had our staff working together. So what that looked like, and there were different things, but we provided opportunities for our staff to share across levels, because as you know, when you're so busy working in your area, in your age level, and for us, our early childhood program to cross over with our K-8 is important, and we try to do that often. So we provided opportunities for our staff to meet. So we would pair like an infant teacher, preschool 3s, a 3rd grade teacher, a 7th grade science teacher together. And once we had our outcomes, our succinct statements, we had them share the ways that they work on these things with their particular age levels, so that we could help each other understand what that looks like at different stages of a child's development. And it also, it brought our staff closer together as well, especially when you're working with, you know, teachers of infants and or preschool, you know, making sure that they're able to articulate to our middle school teachers what those working on those skills look like and help them understand that. I think it just, it brought our staff, actually, it brings staff closer together and helps everybody feel valued, because they're the building blocks for the end result. So we also include our board in this process, and this is something we plan on doing again in the fall, is in one of our earlier PD sessions, is having the opportunity for our staff to do this with our advisory board members, so that they can you know, get to know the school on a deeper level. It allows our staff to feel, again, that value in the members of our board, investing time into them and what they're doing. We've had great success with that. I'm sure other schools have done it, but if you haven't had the chance to do that, it's something I would highly recommend. And then at the end of the year, we often ask staff to reflect on their contributions to our school's mission and how they live it in the classroom. And those different questions will also usually bring out these same outcomes and opportunities to help us understand. Again, everybody's so busy doing, you know, each day, that it helps us kind of reflect back on the school year. So I just want to share a little bit about like our school and what our portrait of a graduate is, now that I've provided an overview of the process that we went through as a school. So for us, it's that question, like, who will you become? And as I mentioned, that's different for different students. So here we go. So for our succinct statements, so we have versatile collaborator. And again, that whole process we went through. These were the overarching, you know, thoughts that came out of that. So what does it look like to be a versatile collaborator? And that is one of the important skills that we want and aptitudes we want our students to have. And so I just shared a couple pictures here of our students working together. And again, that will look different for different age groups. So an example of this would be when our teachers are working together and talking about it. You know, obviously you're working on your critical thinking, your collaboration, your creativity. So an example might be in our science class, and in 8th grade, they do a project, the Rube Goldberg project. So they're working on physics, they're working on mechanical engineering, and they're working in groups to develop these simple machines. And anyone that's done that knows like that you have a certain amount of simple machines, you put it together, you have to figure out how to get it to work to complete a simple task in a complicated way. And then they present it to the school community, there's judges involved, and then the winners go on to a regional competition. So that would be an example of how that would play out in a science classroom in the middle school. We also have other things here. So a collaborator, we have, projects, we have our math teams that are competing, we have science bowls. We even have here in the bottom right, you'll see our esports program. So that's one of the highlights at World Academy, and the students absolutely love this program. And sometimes on Fridays, they'll allow the other students to come and watch them compete, but they get to compete against schools across the country in this program. And then you can see our chorus that are performing for families and winter concert. They can collaborate through music, working together with that. We also have other things going on. We do a stock market program where the students are working together in teams and throughout the course of the year, and challenges. There's concerts, different things throughout the year. So again, it's taking what they're doing in the classroom, but then also, as Beth mentioned, extracurriculars, like what are our offerings, and are we aligning what we're offering to what we want for outcomes? Another important component of the student at World Academy is being a resilient risk taker. And what does that look like? I mean, it can be academic, it's intellectual risks, it's physical risks, as you can see here, climbing a mountain, playing outside in the woods, performing. That is not easy for many of us, being on stage, and so giving our students the opportunity to take risks. We have, here are some of our students that just recently won the Science Bee and Geography Bee and History Bee regionally, so they'll be heading to national competition. So again, taking what they're learning in the classroom and then applying it in other opportunities and other ways for them to demonstrate what they've learned, but then also just allowing them to push outside their comfort zone. So again, we have some pictures. I just have some pictures here because I think, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So cross-country running, having our students compete in races. We offer a ski program. You can see here one of our students, flying off a jump, taking, some of the science program, and then they are able to go out in the community and learn more. That's the Natural Watershed program. And then we have many opportunities throughout the year for our students to perform for each other and for the school. So again, taking those risks. And then I just decided to add this picture in. We just built a new playground at the school, and talk about risks. I'm sure every person's looking at this, and you see all these ladders, and it's built for 5 and up. So our first thing was some of these bigger ladders, and of course we worry about them getting injured, but again, even risky play is important, especially for our younger students, but all students, they don't get outside and climb trees like we used to. So providing opportunities for them to take healthy risks and learn how to to challenge themselves, and also how to be safe. So that is one thing that's important to us. From there, we move on to being a compassionate citizen. And again, that's a big part of what we do, and it looks different at different ages. But here you can see, some of our older students working with our younger ones. Oftentimes when we have, field trips or events at the school, our older students take on those leadership roles, and they help the teachers with the younger groups. So we have a nursing home down the street, and we take our students there for a parade, a Halloween parade, which is very special, as you can see, for the residents, but also for our kids. Some of them don't have grandparents close by, or they often don't think beyond what they know. So bringing them out into the community and see what happens out there is important, and then allowing our older students to take on those leadership roles is important. We also are student government. We find opportunities for them to do different service learning projects throughout the year. One of them was, we have a church next door. They have a community food pantry. So just collecting for that, but also delivering it and spending time over there, learning from, the pastor next door. What is a food pantry? Some of our students, they know they collect the food, but they don't really know why. So helping them understand, what other people in the community are going through and how we can help them with that. Again, other pictures. So our trip to Washington, D.C., that ties into our American Studies, but providing opportunities for them within the curriculum to learn about different ways within our own country and across the globe, but then also giving them the opportunity to experience that. And then here we have a picture of, we do a health walk every year. So again, allowing our older students to take on those roles of helping out in the younger ages. Another statement that came out of this whole process was being a passionate innovator. And one here, you can see this girl with the piece of jewelry. This is something pretty fabulous. So we have a makerspace lab that at our school. So that's for our 3D printing, engineering, technology, robotics. And so in their 3D printing class, they developed these pendants using their 3D printing skills. First, they created the designs and then they printed them. But then we took it a step further. We were fortunate. And I think for us, and I'm sure you'll find this as well, when members of the community see what you're doing and it relates to what they're doing in the real world and they get excited about that, they want to join in and support your school. So we had a family at our school that owns a jewelry store, and they were seeing that what we were doing in the classroom was very similar to what the jewelers are doing now in the real world. So we partnered with them, and they took the students' designs and they created them at the jewelry store into these beautiful necklaces that the students, then they brought them back in, and each student had one at the end. So that was a pretty, it was an amazing process, and the kids, it was really good for them to see, why are we learning, this 3D printing and how can it be applied in the real world? So that was really fabulous. We have our Young Inventors program, which I'm sure many of you have, but our fourth graders go through the whole invention process, and then again, then they present to families, they present to judges, and then they can move on from there. So taking what they're learning in the science classroom and applying it in the real world. And then we have some podcasting going on down here. Some other pictures, applying what they're learning in the classroom again, and taking that outside, taking that with groups. So letting them, and you see all the smiles on their faces. So being passionate and having fun. And then inspirational leader. So we have opportunities for our students. This is our student government president here. He will speak to the students monthly at our assemblies. And then we have our student government student ambassadors. So we have opportunities for those students to get involved in the community at different events that are happening during the day, and then also on the weekends at our school. And, again, leadership will look different. So we have here some of our amazing students at our middle school play. So taking on those roles and really putting yourself out there and performing and giving them those opportunities. So, and then in the end, the way it ends is for us is a well-rounded individual. Again, that's going to look different for every student, but just providing them those opportunities in the classroom. You see our art class. And then, our chess team, we have a chess club, we have a competitive chess team as well. So it will look different for each student, but just providing them those opportunities to explore and become the person they want to be. And so we have a golf program. You can see our students performing again in front of the school, music lessons. And then my last thing that I wanted to share was how do we share this with the outside community? Because when prospective families are coming through, it's hard to capture all that in an hour tour. So we have this lookbook, and this was again this that whole process took us probably a year, but this was the end result. And so who you become, and then to each a world of opportunity. So inside, and you can't exactly tell by looking at it, but it starts with a student. Some of the words, some of the categories that became our groupings when we did these brainstorming sessions. So grow, trust, persevere. And then you can see the way our book turns is the bottom part turns. So then you can see same person, but now they have the opportunity to play in sports. And then same student can perform, can dream. That's where lookbook works. And then, construct, navigate, explore. And then we tried to capture through pictures what that looks like. And then, so you go through the whole book, and then our portrait of a graduate is at the back. And that's one way that we're able to kind of summarize all this in a nice creative way to share with families. And that's it. That's what I got.
Okay, great. I was just thanking Lisa and saying that you're going to take over the slide sharing. And it was great to see how you've so intentionally as a school connected your aptitudes to the program and to the curriculum.
Thanks so much, Beth.
Okay.
And thank you, Lisa. I think folks on the webinar will hear a lot of kind of similar themes. And I'm happy to offer those in a bit of a different context. So I'm going to share my screen here as well. So I wanted to, just as Lisa did, give some very kind of quick context here. We approached the portrait of a learner, which is what we call kind of our guiding capacities for students, from a bit of a different perspective. And it was to really kind of manage significant change within our institution. GCDS had been for about 100 years a nursery through 9 school with about 1,200 students. We're in Greenwich, Connecticut, in the New York metro area. We have a diverse student body. Our students come from about 72 different zip codes. We have a significant population of kids and families who reverse commute out of the city. We have a wide range of learners. We're a family school. About 75 to 90% of our classes stay with us through the successive years. So by the time kids get to high school, a significant percentage of our kids have been with us since preschool. There was a real kind of focus on the balance of tradition and innovation at GCDS, a kind of long-standing core set of values and curriculum that was paired with some really early significant investments and focuses in service, sustainability, global programs. And above all, there was a really strong and established school identity. And then in 2019, the board decided to build a high school. The school purchased another independent school about 2 miles down the road, and built an entire high school campus, 9th through 12th grade, from scratch. And so the opportunity to think about a portrait of the learner was an opportunity to unify the school, to use that as kind of a vector to channel what should be kind of a common set of interests and values and academic goals. It was also really for us an opportunity to focus on how we were going to communicate with our community. And you heard Lisa talk about that, using this not only as an inward-facing tool that would guide our teachers and our students, but also as a tool through which to articulate our program and what the new elements of that N through 12 program would be. I'm going to start where Lisa started, which is the mission. You can see our mission up on the slide there. And the line that you hear over and over again at GCDS is this focus on developing what is finest in our students, empowering them to develop that within themselves. And so we wanted that to be at the core of our process. In developing the upper school, which was designed to add about 85 faculty members and 500 students to our student population down the road, we had a number of goals that we thought would be kind of good proving grounds for the development of this portrait, this common focus throughout the school. The construction of the upper school was partly to shift the pedagogy of the entire institution towards more of an applied model, to diversify our academic program, to diversify its offerings, to diversify our student and faculty and family populations, again, to continue to build on our community, adding 85 new teachers and 500 new students, to focus on skills that we knew were really crucial in the modern world. Collaboration, again, kind of an applied focus, being able to work with a range of perspectives and channel your learning into a real world situation. And to bring together the best of our Old Church Road campus and that 100-year tradition of community, while shepherding in new perspectives and understanding the realities of how adding a high school division would transform the culture of the whole school. One of the real focuses as we brought this process together 5 years ago, and you heard this in what Lisa said too, was thinking about how every division would have a stake in this. From the preschool, which we call our lower elementary school, which starts in nursery, all the way through 12th grade. We wanted a common articulation of our program, a common set of values, a common set of goals that the second grade teacher could pick up and apply in their classroom just as easily as the advanced physics teacher in 12th grade. And so as we thought about process, that became crucial. You see here a picture from one of our early faculty retreats, which captures kind of a funny moment, but also captures some of the themes that we're thinking about in this. So much as Lisa articulated, we started out with different kind of focus groups, having faculty work together, having families work together, having students work together, and centering this all around the board. We started out by having those groups meet separately to understand what were the interests and priorities of teachers, what were the things that were on students' minds, how were they perceiving the world around them, and how were they thinking about their own learning. And then we began to blend those meetings together to start to look for, and again, you see this word that Lisa mentioned, patterns. What are the kindergarten teachers talking about? What are the 8th graders talking about? What's the board focused on? And where do we start to see that sifting out of some common terms and priorities? We were also really focused on a core set of capacities for students that would capture and be flexible for evolution. We knew that the school would continue to evolve. The construction of the upper school was meant to really kind of instill in the whole institution an ability to grow and change with a changing world. But we also knew that students were going to evolve, and we wanted something that would work for students 5, 10, 20 years from now as much as it would today. And then the other key piece was we wanted something that was going to capture a cultural priority of collaboration and of encouraging risk-taking. Now, as we thought about this portrait, this is the kind of poster and design that's now in every classroom in the entire school. It's in every student planner. It's at the front of every course guide. And it brings together our portrait of a learner and then matches next to those 10 capacities our design principles. So effectively portraying kind of the product and the process in the same design here, having what we see as those core capacities of the learner with what the motivations were behind them. And really focusing in on those portrait capacities. I'm going to leave this up here for a second. You can see some real kind of core themes that begin to emerge. there's a real theme on collaboration. There's a real focus on communication, on how you take a strong core education and learn how to apply that to the world around you through speaking with others, through communicating your ideas with clarity, engaging with different perspectives. All of these fold into some real kind of key motivations. Again, that application of learning. And I think Lisa was describing this in her own school as well. We're really focused on authentic audiences. So how do you use the portrait of a learner to bring your broader community into the classroom? How do you use that portrait of a learner to leverage the expertise of your alumni, of your parents and families in your community, and bring them into a class? And that, I'll walk through some examples in different divisions, but that ranges from nursery through 12th grade in the ways that we've done that. We wanted to use this to guide shifts for teachers and assessment and reporting. That ties to building tighter relationships between students, teachers, and families. And then also, this portrait really advances what was a core tenet of the school's founding and continues to be a focus today, which is a focus on applying learning towards the public good. As a student moves from nursery all the way through 12th grade, the goal in how we applied this portrait was that students gradually take on more responsibility and ownership over their learning and over the reflection of their growth using these 10 capacities from the portrait of a learner. So just in kind of a quick walkthrough here of our 4 divisions, in our lower elementary school, these tools that kind of emerge from the portrait are primarily used by faculty. They guide the lesson planning and unit design. They're central to our community values. Our mascot's the tiger, so the acronym that we use for our community values, which come out of that portrait, is Tiger Pride. They center the way that our faculty are looking at and tracking student growth. They structure our conversations with our families. The language from that portrait we start to weave into parent conferences and semester and annual reporting, even in the lower elementary school. And they're also the primary driver of our interdivisional professional learning programs. We have 4 days a year where we bring our almost 450 faculty and staff together. And those are all centered around, no matter the topic or the issue, centered around that language of the portrait. As students shift into our upper elementary program, and for us, that's grades 3 through 5, teachers continue to specify their use of these portrait capacities. So in interim and semester reporting, that's 4 times a year, our teachers will select 2 capacities to spotlight in their narrative and conversations related to each student. And those are strengths and also focuses for growth. Those will be specific to the student. They are the foundation for our conversations in those teacher conferences, which happen twice a year. They are the lens, those 10 capacities through which we channel our narratives around student growth. And we weave map testing and other kind of data collecting through that lens. They structure the family conversations throughout the year. And they also are woven into our lesson and unit design, as well as those Tiger Pride community values. As students transition into the middle school, you start to see a really major shift. So in grades 6 through 8, that responsibility and ownership over articulating student growth through the portrait shifts onto the student, and our faculty act as mentors for students to begin to reflect on their own growth using that common language. So student goal setting at the beginning of the year, each student works with their advisor, and advisors will work with 5 or 6 advisees to set out their goals for the year using the language of the portrait capacities. Generally, that means focusing on 3 to 4 different portrait capacities that represent strengths and areas for growth for each student. Conferences in the middle school shift away from being parent and teacher focused to being student led. So that each of those conferences, and that happens at the end of the first semester in the middle school, is led by the student. They design a presentation identifying their 2 to 4 areas where they focus on their strengths in classes, as well as their goals for growth. And those capacities, those 2 to 4 capacities they identify, they trace through their work in each of their classes, but the student is leading and presenting in that meeting to their family and to their teachers. This also centers our faculty discussions in the middle school. Assessment, reporting, and family relationships, we work hard to really kind of center those around those 10 capacities and that language of the portrait of a learner. And again, you see those Tiger Pride community norms flow through the middle school. And then when students transition into our high school, which is grades 9 through 12 for us, you really see that student responsibility take full form. We continue those student-led conferences. Those take place for each student in the upper school 9 through 12 in the fall. At the end of the school year, students lead a similar personalized event called the Presentation of Learning, where a student will take the 2 to 4 capacities they focused on in their student-led conference in the fall, and they'll measure how they did. They'll look at their growth throughout the year, and they'll utilize their portfolio of work from all of their classes as their evidence for that presentation of learning. We film all of these presentations of learning. We have a tech office that somehow pulls off 500 of these things. And students hold on to those videos and reflect on them in subsequent years, how they characterize different elements of growth and what things they focused on. The portrait capacities continue to center our faculty discussions and our community norms. They're also at the core of our curricular design. So we don't participate in the AP or IB programs, but we do have an honors program as well as an advanced applied studies program. Students' entry into those programs is all governed by the portrait capacities, by students working with faculty to assess their growth in these different areas. And the standards for those honors and advanced programs are all reflective of that portrait language. One of the things we're also dedicated to in the upper school, and this is true throughout the school, is that the portrait capacities and that poster that you saw is on every wall. It's part of every policy and student-facing program in the upper school. And students are also early on compelled to, and then gradually take on the responsibility of using that language in how they reflect on their own growth and in how they complete their work. The other thing that we anchored the portrait capacities in, and this has been an enormous help in really kind of prioritizing their use in our program, is in the college process. So the whole college process is designed around each student's individual and independent articulation of their growth through the language of the portrait capacities. That's the framing of their profile that they put forward in the college process. And we found that unless we instilled those kind of necessities within our actual program, and frankly, within really important parts of the program, like the college process, it was really hard to get students to buy into and to use that language. Now that we've done that, and we really started that about 3 years ago, those capacities have really become a lexicon, not only for our faculty, but also for our students. Another way that you can see the portrait at work is in the growth of our signature programs. You heard me say that those capacities, those 10 capacities, are part of the language of our reporting, of our assessment, of our kind of academic levels in honors and advanced courses. They're also part of our signature programs. So you'll see through, I just picked 6 of our 12 programs here. All of these programs, the theme, the idea, the language behind it all stems from that collaborative, interdisciplinary, authentic audience mission that really comes through in the portrait capacities. About 2 years into utilizing the portrait, we've started a kind of biannual review process that's led by students in the upper school. Again, we're fortunate that a majority of our students have come through our divisions. And so by the time that a student is a junior or senior, they have a real ability to kind of reflect on their experience throughout the divisions at GCDS. This is a picture still soon after COVID of one of our student focus groups that have taken each of the capacities of the portrait and started to break it down and interrogate it. Does the language make sense? Does this work? Do I see this in my classes? One of the real kind of values that this process has brought to us as a school is to kidify the language. And what we mean by that is, we as educators will sit there and say, iterate, that's a great part of this, or ideate, that's a key part of the design process for a learner. But a kid will say to you, I don't ever say I'm going to ideate something, right? And so it was really helpful for them to break down, what does this mean to us? What is language that we would actually use as students? And what would be meaningful to us as we think about reflecting on our own growth. And we have changed the language in our portrait based on student feedback. The last thing that I'll say is, we started out with these goals, and these are the same goals from the start of the slide deck here for the portrait. And every year we have faculty and student teams who reflect on how well we're doing with that. How useful are those capacities? Are they actually serving faculty and students and families in the ways that we think they are? And that's been a very valuable process for us because we've identified the areas where we need to keep growing and thinking about changing our practice and using those portrait capacities to their greatest benefit. One of those is our kind of curricular arc and transition between divisions. Every year, a piece of feedback we get is, the way that I see the portrait used in the upper elementary school, that could translate a little smoother as a parent to the way that I see that used in the middle school. That automatically gives us a focus for those professional learning days. And again, it still centers it around that common language of the portrait of a learner. Another area that we continue to focus really particularly in the upper school is consistency, drive, and format of assessment and reporting. We've explored a number of different ways of shifting to maybe more of a report card / core capacities kind of mapping tool for families. Right now, we don't have a reporting tool that's specific to the portrait. We just use that language in some pretty traditional reporting formats. But we've been looking at the ways in which tools like Mastery Transcript provide more of kind of a mapping of that growth and thinking about how we could adapt our own within GCDS. We've also looked at how these capacities continue to build community, especially as we in independent schools operate within a really dynamic world outside of our campuses, how we continue to make sure that that portrait language is helping our students and community make sense of the world around them and serve the diversity of constituencies we have. And the final piece is we always want to make sure that the portrait capacities are helping us build those relationships between students, teachers, and families. That comes through assessment and reporting, that comes through, as Lisa mentioned, the ways in which this language flows into our admissions programs and into our alumni and development spaces. And that's an area of focus for us across the board. That's it for me. And I'm happy to turn it back to Beth here as we think about some questions from both of our presentations.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Lisa. So we have just a couple minutes, and here's one of my questions, right? And that is, as you both went through this process and gathered information, I like the language of separate and then blended bringing together for meetings. Was there any particular capacity or aptitude that generated more conversation amongst your teachers? Were there areas that they really wrestled more with than others? We'll have to unmute Lisa. Let me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For us, for our staff, similar to the way Andrew described working with the students and the language used, I think when you start, what we ended with, the versatile collaborator, risk taker, etc. Sometimes that's harder to like get your thoughts going. So for our staff, it was starting and allowing them to talk about what they're doing in their classroom and what, in particularly to their age levels. And then, you know, how do you work on critical thinking skills? How do you collaborate? And then that generated discussion, and then that helped other teachers understand and think about, oh, well, I do this in my classroom. We work on these things, and then that facilitated that flow from there. But when if we started with just those bigger ideas, it can be intimidating for some people.
We had a very similar experience to what Lisa just described. I think for us, one of the greatest areas of impact has been in pulling our broader community into kind of more direct investment in the student experience. So using that portrait language and the process of developing it allowed us to really lean on the expertise of community members, of parents, of alums, who suddenly saw really kind of clear gateways through which they could contribute to the program, whether that's partnering with classes, whether that's coming in and working with faculty and professional learning, whether that's kind of being an evangelist among our parent population for the ways in which they saw growth being captured in their child. The working hard to kind of distill down from the wide range of ideas and questions we started with has been really important for us, and maintaining that simplicity, because again, it's really given a language that's common across all of the corners of our community.
Thank you. So you both have given us so much to think about. We appreciate it. And so I just want to mention a couple things. One, at our November annual conference, there'll be a pre-conference session specifically on Portrait of a Graduate, Profile of a Learner. That will be on Wednesday, November 20th, and registration for the conference opens on Monday. That Portrait of a Graduate session last year was extremely popular and did sell out. So if it's an area you're interested in, watch Monday for when registration opens. We will be sending the recording. It takes about a week, but you'll get the recording. And at the same time, we're going to send a bank of resources regarding Portrait of a Graduate that we have. Our colleagues in the public school sector have collected a lot of resources. So we'll connect that as well. And we'll also be asking if some of you are interested in coming together to have some small cohorts. It looked like a lot of our schools are just embarking or have just started the process. As we heard from Lisa and Andrew, it evolves, and it is a process, and it needs to be inclusive, and it needs to be thoughtful, and therefore take time. And if people are interested, we can create some cohorts together to talk, share ideas, and support each other for schools that are evolving. So with that, I'm going to thank again Lisa and Andrew. Really wonderful ideas, thought-provoking, and so incredibly intentional how you have created these Portrait of a Graduate, the capacities and aptitudes and the language that is embedded within your school, the life of your school and the mission of your school. And that is the goal. So thank you. Thank you all who have joined us. And we'll be in touch next week with some follow-up.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Andrew.